Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
Glad to be here.
I have to say, looking at the stack of papers you've brought in today, I'm reeling a little bit.
It is a heavy stack, I'll admit.
I genuinely don't know whether to pop a champagne bottle or, go hide under my desk.
It's the kind of heavy that once you lift it, you might realize you never have to lift anything else ever again.
Okay, that is a massive promise to start with, and honestly, my skepticism meter is already twitching.
Fair enough. It should be.
So let's set the scene for you. Today is Tuesday, January 27, 2026.
Right in the thick of it.
If you're listening to this on your commute, maybe look out the window. Maybe you see an office park that's a little emptier than it was, 3 years ago?
For sure.
Or maybe you looked at the stock market, seen it hitting all-time highs, but then you look at your own bank account and it just feels stagnant. There's a disconnect. Things feel weird.
Weird is probably the polite word for it. We are living through a glitch in the simulation.
A glitch in the simulation. And to help us decode this glitch, we are diving into a piece of writing that just dropped today from a writer named Simon. The title is Provocative Enough to Ruin a Dinner Party.
It definitely is.
Labor has no future, and that's a good thing. Now, usually when someone says labor has no future, my brain goes straight to, zombie apocalypse.
Right. Grab the canned goods, head for the bunker.
Exactly. It's all over. But this deep dive, it claims to be optimistic.
It is radically optimistic, but it's a terrifying kind of optimism. It requires a complete rewiring of how we view reality.
Okay.
The core premise here is startlingly simple. The world as we know it has already ended. It ended sometime late last year, in 2025.
Already ended. Wow.
But most of us are suffering from what the source calls normalcy bias. We're all just walking around in the wreckage of the old world, pretending the 9-to-5 still makes sense, pretending that trading your time for money is still a viable survival strategy for the next decade.
And he's saying it isn't.
He's saying, quite convincingly, that it is absolutely not.
Okay, hold on. Normalcy bias. I want to unpack that immediately because I feel like I might be suffering from it. I got up, I made coffee, I drove here. That feels pretty normal. Why is my brain tricking me?
Well, think about where our brains evolved. The African savanna, right?
Right.
On the savanna, things change very, very slowly. The seasons change, the herds migrate, maybe a river shifts its course over a whole generation. We're wired for linear, slow change.
Yeah.
So if a tsunami is coming, literal wall of water, your brain often tries to protect you by normalizing the receding water line. It tells you, oh, look, low tide. It actively ignores the signs of catastrophe until the water is in your lungs.
So we are standing on the beach, the water has vanished, and we're just collecting seashells while this tidal wave of AI is hanging right over our heads.
That's the analogy. The source says, and I'm quoting here, we have no built-in neural circuits for thinking globally or exponentially. It's completely maladaptive for the current moment.
So we're biologically incapable of getting it.
Intuitively, yes. So if you feel calm right now, it's not because things are safe. It's a biological trick.
Great. So my calmness is a symptom. I love that. But let's look at the provocation here. The source calls this era a jobless boom. That sounds like a contradiction in terms. Usually, a boom means help-wanted signs everywhere.
That was the 20th century model, absolutely. Back then, if Ford wanted to sell more cars, they had to hire more guys to screw on the wheels. Capital needed labor.
Right. More production, more jobs.
But look at the Atlanta Fed forecast for late 2025. They were predicting massive GDP growth, like over 5%, but hours worked were flat.
Flat.
That is the decoupling. The economy is growing, companies are making a ton of money, but they don't need us to do it anymore.
So the mission today is to deconstruct this jobless boom. We need to figure out why this isn't a catastrophe.
Or at least why Simon thinks it's not.
Right, exactly. Because I have to play devil's advocate here. If labor has no future, how do I pay my mortgage? How do I buy groceries? It feels like we're skipping a really, really important step between robots take our jobs and utopia.
And that is exactly where the drama of ideas comes in. That's the whole point of this. We have to move past the fear of AI because, frankly, that ship has sailed, the tech is here, and look at the structural changes we need to survive.
All right, let's jump into section 1 then, the narrative arc, the drama. Because this really does feel like a story we are living in the middle of. The source talks about an existential itch. Describe that for me, because everyone I know is just tired. Is that the itch?
It's deeper than tiredness, much deeper. The source describes it as ontological vertigo.
Ontological vertigo.
Yeah, think about vertigo, that spinning sensation while you can't find the floor, you don't know which way is up. Humans, right now, in 2026, are experiencing this because the very ground of our reality is moving. We're trapped in what Simon calls a living lie.
A living lie. That's harsh.
Is it, though? Think about your average office worker right now. We know, deep down, that the whole system of a 40-hour work week is becoming absurd. We see the machines doing the work. We see the software writing the code. We see these human emulators, which we'll definitely get to, taking over entire workflows. Yet we wake up, we pour the coffee, we sit in traffic, and we perform the ritual. We are pantomiming industry.
It's like we're reenacting the 2010s because we just don't know what else to do.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that creates a very specific nagging feeling. A purpose vacuum.
Yeah.
We've spent the last century optimizing society, for one thing, GDP growth, at the expense of everything else, especially human connection.
The friendship recession. He uses that term.
He does. It's a real term. We have literally optimized ourselves into what he calls collective soul sickness.
Optimizing ourselves into collective soul sickness. I want to pause on that because it sounds like poetry, but I think you're saying it's actually an economic principle. The economy grows because we're lonely.
Let's break it down. Think about a Friday night in, say, 1995 versus a Friday night in 2026. Okay.
In 1995, if you were bored or hungry, you went to a friend's house, you cooked together, you hung out on the porch. How much money changed hands in that interaction?
Almost nothing. Maybe a few bucks for pasta ingredients.
Exactly. Almost zero GDP growth. Now look at a Friday night today. You're exhausted from Zoom fatigue. You don't have the energy to coordinate with friends. So what do?
You order DoorDash.
Transaction.
You pay for Netflix.
Thank
You
you.
feel lonely, so maybe you buy something on Amazon to get that little dopamine hit.
Transaction. Or you subscribe to an OnlyFans, or you pay for a digital companion.
Right.
The economy literally grows by monetizing the collapse of human connection. If we were all happy, secure, and sitting around a campfire talking, the GDP would tank.
So the friendship recession is actually a growth sector.
It's a massive growth sector, and that is the sickness. We are burning our social fabric to keep the economic engine running. That hits hard. And it connects to something else in the notes about the current context of 2026. CEOs are reporting that employee burnout is actually up, even though AI is doing the heavy lifting. This doesn't make any sense. If I have a robot assistant, shouldn't I be chilling on a beach somewhere?
You would think so. But this is where a concept called the jagged frontier comes in.
Okay, the jagged frontier. I love the name. It sounds like a sci-fi western. What is it?
So imagine a big circle that represents everything a human can do, all our skills.
Got it.
Now imagine AI is like a sea urchin, a spiky blob expanding inside that circle. It doesn't grow evenly like a balloon. Some of the spikes punch way out AI is already better than doctors at diagnosing rare diseases or better than lawyers at contract review. Superhuman.
But other parts are still lagging behind.
Right. Other parts of the urchin are still way inside the circle. They might struggle to read a handwritten note or, understand the nuance of a passive-aggressive email.
So it's not a straight line of progress. It's jagged.
Right. The source puts it like this. Machine intelligence has already surged past human capability in scenario domains while lagging in others. Now, apply that to your job. The AI took all the boring work. It took the data entry, the scheduling, the routine emails.
Which sounds great on paper. I hate data entry.
But be honest, did you really hate it, or was it actually a mental break? When you were formatting that spreadsheet for an hour, your brain could just idle. You could listen to a podcast. You could zone out. It was a micro break.
That's true. It was like the spacing, the padding between the intense thinking.
The AI took the spacing, it ate all the padding. So what's left for the human?
Just the hard parts.
Only the high-intensity, high-stakes decision-making, the judgment calls, the crisis management, the creative breakthroughs. There are no micro breaks anymore.
Right.
Every single minute of the workday is now high-level cognitive load. We're sprinting a marathon because the robot is carrying our water bottles, but we're still the ones running.
And the robot is just running alongside us, not even breaking a sweat, asking why we're breathing so hard. That explains the burnout. We've basically distilled the job down to just the stressful parts.
Exactly.
So if that's the problem, this vertigo, this sickness, this insane high-intensity burnout, who's the villain? In most stories about 2026, the villain is the AI. It's the Terminator. It's Skynet.
Right.
But Simon seems to suggest the villain is something much, much older.
The AI is just the weather. You don't get mad at a hurricane, you just try to survive it. The villain here is what he calls the iron cage.
Iron cage. That sounds medieval.
It's a concept from Max Weber, the sociologist. It refers to the Protestant work ethic and the whole structure of modern capitalism. But for us today, the villain is one specific delusion.
What's that?
The delusion that new jobs will be created. You hear this all the time from tech leaders. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, he keeps saying it. Everyone's jobs will change, but we'll create new roles.
Right, the classic horses to cars argument. When the car replaced the horse, the stable boys became mechanics. When the tractor replaced the farmer went to the factory. Why shouldn't I believe that? It has happened every single time in history.
And this is the critical point where you have to stop looking at history and start looking at the mechanics of the thing. Why is this time different?
Okay, why?
Because AI isn't a tool like a steam engine or a tractor. Those were tools that amplified our muscle. They made us stronger, faster. AI is different. It is intelligence itself.
Okay, but we still need humans to guide the intelligence, right? To be the prompt engineers or whatever the job of the week is.
For about 5 minutes, maybe. But look at the trajectory. When you automate intelligence and very soon dexterity with humanoid robots, there is no next rung on the ladder for humans to climb to.
What do you mean?
Humans have nothing left to sell that is economically viable compared to the cost of compute. If an AI can think faster, write better, code perfectly, and eventually move cheaper than you, what is left?
The human touch. Creativity, empathy.
Can you build a global economy on 8 billion people selling human touch to each other? Maybe. But that's not a labor market as we know it. The idea that we will all just find new jobs is the villain because it keeps us trapped in that iron cage. It prevents us from looking for real solutions because we're waiting for a job opening that is never, ever coming.
That is a chilling thought. We're waiting for a train at a station that has already been demolished.
And the cultural villain, the one inside our own heads, is our internalized belief that I am my job. The fear is that without labor, we have no social legitimacy, no value. We are fighting to keep our own chains on because we don't know who we are without them.
Which brings us to the stakes. Because if we are clinging to a sinking ship, how much time do we actually have?
Years. Maybe months for some sectors. The source argues AGI, artificial general intelligence, is likely by 2029, but the massive economic displacement is happening now in 2026. We are at the inflection point of an exponential curve.
And I feel like humans are really, really bad at exponential curves.
We're terrible at them. Think about the paper folding analogy. If you take a standard piece of paper and you fold it in half 42 times, how thick is it?
I don't know, maybe the size of a phone book. A car.
It reaches the moon.
Get out of here. No way.
It reaches the moon. That is exponential growth. For the first 30 folds, it looks like nothing. It's just a piece of paper. That's where we were with AI in, say, 2022.
Okay.
Now we are at fold 35. We are starting to see the thickness. By fold 40, we are leaving the atmosphere. So if we ignore this transition, the source warns of a truly dystopian future.
The Elysium scenario. Matt Damon in a robo-suit fighting for basic healthcare.
Exactly. Billionaires own the robot fleets, they own the AI, and the rest of us fight for scraps because we have no labor to sell. But, and here is the high-stakes opportunity, if we face it, if we demand structural change, we get universal flourishing.
Universal flourishing. That sounds lovely, but also very vague.
It's the era of abundance, where work is optional. But to get there, we have to survive the transition. We have to realize that labor has no future, so we can start building a future for humans.
Okay, let's get into the engine room. Let's talk logic. Because it's easy to say robots will do everything, but the economics of that are really messy. The source talks about a shift from labor leverage to civic leverage. Break that down for me.
This is the core binary. This is A versus B. The old model, the one we all grew up with, is labor leverage. It's based on something called double bilateral dependence.
Okay.
It just means capital needs labor to build the cars, and labor needs capital to get the wages. We need them, they need us.
A standoff.
It's a standoff. And because capital needed us, we had power. We could strike.
The picket line. The ultimate weapon of the working class.
Exactly. The picket line works because if the workers stop, the money stops. If GM workers walk out, no cars get made, GM stock crashes. The workers have a veto on production.
But in the new model.
In 2026 and beyond, robots and AI replace labor. If the factory is automated and the software is automated, the working class loses its veto power. If you walk off the job, the AI just keeps running. It doesn't care. You can't strike against a server farm.
So we lose our leverage. If we can't stop the machine, how do we bargain for anything?
Simon argues we must shift to civic leverage. We move from earning your keep through wages to owning your share through equity or dividends. We can't force them to pay us for work, so we have to use our status as citizens to demand a share of the automated output.
That's a huge mental shift. It's going from being an employee of a company to being a shareholder of the entire nation.
That's it.
But why would the powers that be ever agree to that? If I'm a billionaire with a robot army, why do I care about the citizens? Why don't I just build a big wall and enjoy my utopia?
Because of what the source calls the economic agency paradox. This is the hidden mechanism. It's the self-destruct button built into the old economy, and honestly, it's the only thing that might save us.
The agency paradox. Okay, walk me through it.
It's the decoupling in action. On an individual level, companies act rationally to cut costs. They fire humans to increase efficiency and profit. Great for the quarterly report. If I fire you and replace you with an AI that's 100 times cheaper, my margins go up.
Right. Good for my stock price. Makes sense.
But, and this is the paradox, if every company does this on a massive scale, they collectively destroy their own consumer base.
Because robots don't buy iPhones.
Robots don't buy iPhones. Robots don't buy diapers. They don't take out mortgages. Demand is income. If you wipe out wages, you wipe out demand.
It's an Ouroboros eating its own tail. The more efficient the companies get, the faster they destroy their own customers.
Precisely. So even the billionaire in his bunker needs a population with money, or his robot factory has no one to sell its products to. The circulation of the economy just seizes up.
But are we actually seeing this happen yet? Or is this still just a theory?
We are seeing the precursor to this in what he calls the cost collapse. The source mentions that some professional tasks, complex cognitive work that used to be done by highly paid consultants dropped from costing $3,500 to execute to just $12 in 1 year.
Wait, say that again? $4,500 to $12.
$12. That is a 400-fold efficiency improvement.
400-fold. My brain can't even process that number.
Let's put it in real terms. Imagine you run a trucking company. Fuel is your biggest cost. Suddenly, a new fuel is invented that is 400 times cheaper. Gas goes from $4 a gallon to 1 penny a gallon.
I'd be rich. My profit margins would explode.
For about a month. And then what happens?
My competitor also gets the penny gas.
And the new guy down the street gets the penny gas. What happens to the price of shipping?
It crashes. We'd just undercut each other until we were barely making a profit again.
Exactly. The value gets passed on to the consumer, or it just evaporates into thin air. In the labor market, humans are the $4 gas. AI is the penny gas. You cannot compete.
So the machine is breaking. That's clear. How do we fix it? The source outlines two possible models, Model A and Model B. I want to spend some real time here because this feels like the actual blueprint for the future. Let's start with Model A, David Shapiro's sovereign equity.
Shapiro's model is essentially this. The wage dies, but markets survive. He wants to keep capitalism, he likes the efficiency of markets, the innovation, but he wants to change who gets the money that flows through it.
Okay, so in this world, I don't have a job. How do I eat?
Through a combination of UBI, universal basic income, and more importantly, democratized capital. This involves creating sovereign wealth funds. Think of it like the Alaska Permanent Fund.
Right, that's where Alaska pays its residents a share of the state's oil money.
Yes. Because the oil is a common resource that belongs to the state, the citizens get a dividend from its profits. Shapiro argues we should view AI and automation the exact same way. The massive data sets they were trained on, that's our collective data. The infrastructure they run on, that operates within our borders, under our laws.
So we tax it.
We tax the automation, we tax the robots, the land they use, the resources they consume, and we stop taxing labor because there is no labor left to tax.
And all that tax money goes into a big pot and gets distributed to every citizen.
Yes, a national dividend. Your primary income is not from a boss, it's from being a citizen owner of the nation's productive assets.
Okay, here's my skepticism, and it's a big one. Government programs are not exactly known for their stellar efficiency. If we rely on the government to collect all the profit from the robots and then hand it out, isn't that just begging for corruption? Or mismanagement? Or hyperinflation?
It's a huge risk. That's why Shapiro insists on radical transparency. He points to Ukraine's Prozoro system, a completely digital, transparent government procurement system, as a model. If the government is handling the money for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, every single transaction must be on a public ledger, maybe a blockchain, visible to every single citizen in real time.
So if a politician tries to siphon off $1 million for a new yacht, we all get a notification on our phones.
Ideally, yes. And since we can't strike anymore, remember, labor leverage is gone, we have to use embargoes.
Embargoes, like trade embargoes?
Consumer embargoes. Since we are the consumers, our power is in not buying. If a megacorporation refuses to pay its fair share into the sovereign fund, we organize a boycott, we crash their stock, we use our collective power as citizen shareholders to enforce the social contract.
Okay, so that's Model A. We become shareholders of the nation. It's still capitalism, but we all start with a trust fund from the robots. Now, what about Model B, David Scott Patterson's abundance economics? This one sounds a bit more radical.
It is. It's much more radical. Patterson looks at the math of that penny gas scenario we talked about and takes it to its logical conclusion. He argues that in a world of perfect AI and robotics, the marginal cost of production for most goods and services hits zero.
And marginal cost is the cost to make one more of something. Right?
Exactly. Let's take a simple coffee mug. To make one more mug, you need materials like ceramic, you need energy for the kiln, and you need labor or person to mold it, package it, ship it. In Patterson's fully automated world, the robots mine the clay. The solar panels and fusion plants provide the energy. The AI runs the factory. The self-driving truck delivers it to your door. What is the cost of human labor in that chain?
Zero.
What is the cost of energy? With advanced renewables, it's near zero. So the mug costs basically nothing. Maybe a fraction of a cent for the raw materials.
Okay, but the company that owns the mug factory still wants to sell it to me for $10.
Yeah.
They need to make a profit.
But remember the competition. If I can make the mug for a penny, and you can make the mug for a penny, and we are both using super intelligent AI agents to optimize our pricing against each other, I'll sell it for $9. You'll immediately undercut me and sell it for $8. I'll go to $5. You'll go to $1. Eventually, we're both selling it for 2 cents.
The profit margin completely evaporates.
Exactly. This is the zero profit logic. In a world of perfect AI-driven efficiency, no company can maintain a competitive moat for long. Competition drives prices down to the cost of production. And since the cost of production is basically zero, the price approaches zero.
But if there is no profit to be made, why would anyone even run a business? Why would I build a shoe factory if I can't make any money from it?
That is the kicker. Patterson argues that private, for-profit companies won't run these businesses. They would have no incentive to. So governments or public cooperatives must own the autonomous businesses. They become public utilities.
So the shoe factory becomes like the water company.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist to make a profit. It just provides shoes because people need shoes.
Yes. It's post-capitalist abundance. The argument is that capitalism is a fantastic tool for allocating scarce resources. But when resources are no longer scarce, you don't need capitalism. You need a system of distribution.
This sounds exactly like Star Trek, replicators and no money.
It is Star Trek. And notice, in Star Trek, Captain Picard doesn't get paid. He doesn't have a salary. He explores the galaxy because he wants to. That's his passion.
But we are a long, long way from Star Trek. We are in 2026. This transition sounds incredibly messy. Before we talk about how we get there, I want to clarify some of these terms. We've thrown a lot of jargon around. Let's do a quick concept check. We mentioned human emulators earlier. This is the technology that, I have to admit, really scares me.
It should. This is the XAI concept. Sometimes they call it macro hard, and I'm sure that pun is intended.
So a human emulator isn't a physical robot walking around an office room.
No, it's pure software. But here's the terrifying difference. Traditional automation requires an API, an application programming interface. You have to write special code to talk to the back end of a system. It's complex and brittle. A human emulator is an AI that uses a computer exactly like a human being does.
What do you mean?
It looks at the screen using computer vision. It moves the mouse cursor. It clicks on icons. It types on the virtual keyboard.
So it doesn't need to be plugged into the matrix. It just sits at the virtual desk and uses the apps like a person.
Precisely. The source says, the system requires absolutely zero modifications to existing software. It literally mimics human actions. This is why the generic office job is completely doomed. You don't need to upgrade your company's ancient enterprise software to replace the accountant. You just install the human emulator. It opens Excel, it reads the PDF invoice, it types and sends the email.
That is devastatingly efficient.
Yeah.
It's like the ghost in the shell taking over your cubicle. And it's cheaper than a human worker in India or the Philippines.
Much, much cheaper. We used to talk about offshoring to cheaper labor markets. This is AI shoring. Why pay a remote worker $5 an hour when the emulator costs 5 cents an hour, works 20/47, never sleeps, never complains, and never ever leaks company secrets?
The business logic is just irresistible.
The economic pressure is irresistible. That's the direct quote. It is like gravity. You can't fight gravity.
Okay, so we have the human emulator. We also talked about the jagged frontier. I want to bring up one more concept from the source before we move on. The aristocrat model. Because this is supposed to be the light at the end of the tunnel. If the emulators take the jobs and the sovereign equity pays the bills, what do we actually do all day?
This brings us to the master analogy of the whole piece. Look at the 18th century aristocrats, or really any wealthy landed elite in history. They didn't have jobs, they didn't trade their time for money, but did they just sit around and stare at the walls?
Some of them, probably.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were incredibly busy.
They were. Lord Byron wrote poetry. Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry, discovered oxygen. Charles Darwin was a gentleman of independent means. He didn't sail on the Beagle for a paycheck.
He did it out of pure curiosity.
The source argues that history shows us exactly what humans do when they don't have to work to survive. They pursue their obsessions. They create. They discover. They philosophize. The aristocrats had servants to do all the drudgery.
And now, the robots and the AI are the servants for everyone.
We are democratizing the aristocratic lifestyle. We are moving from human sacrifice to productivity, which is really what a job is, to the obsessive pursuit of interest.
So we all get to live like they do in Downton Abbey, but without the upstairs-downstairs class war, because the entire downstairs staff are just servers in a data center.
That is the hope. There's also an alternative visual he uses from Václav Havel, the greengrocer.
The guy with the sign. I remember this from a political science class.
Yes. Havel described a greengrocer living under communism who puts a sign in his shop window that says, "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. He doesn't even care. He just does it to stay safe, to not get in trouble.
Right.
Simon argues, we are all that greengrocer. We put the "I love my job" sign in our window. We put the hustle culture sign on our LinkedIn profile, not because we believe in it, but because we are afraid of what happens if we don't.
Living the lie.
And if we all decide together to take down the sign, if we admit that labor no longer equals worth, the entire system changes. We have to stop living the lie.
That leads directly to what I think is the mic drop quote of this entire deep dive. I have it highlighted here. True wealth is the freedom to be unproductive. The freedom to spend your time on what matters to you, not what the market demands.
It's a complete inversion of our current values. Being unproductive is currently a moral failing, an insult. In this future, it becomes the very definition of freedom.
I want to challenge you on this, though, because it sounds beautiful, but humans are. Well, we're status-seeking monkeys. If I can't get status from being the VP of sales at some company, won't I just find some other, maybe equally toxic way to feel better than my neighbor? Won't we just end up competing on, I don't know, who has the best garden or the most Twitter followers?
Oh, absolutely. We won't stop being competitive. But the nature of the competition changes. It won't be about survival. It won't be a zero-sum game of, I need to beat you so I can eat and pay my rent. It will be, I want to be the best poet in the district, or I want to organize the most amazing community festival. The competition shifts from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And frankly, a society competing over poetry and gardening sounds a lot nicer than one competing over who can optimize ad-click revenue.
That is a fair point. I would much rather lose a gardening competition than a layoff round. I want to throw 3 audio hooks from the source at you, these provocative opening lines, and just get your quick reaction. Hook number 1, human labor doesn't get 400 times cheaper annually. It can't. But AI just did.
That is the simple math that ends the debate. You can't eat 400 times less food. You can't live in a house that costs 400 times less. Biology has a floor. Our needs are inelastic. Technology's cost has no floor. That is why the new jobs argument ultimately fails. You cannot compete with an asymptote.
Hook number 2. If you're fighting to preserve your job, you're fighting for the wrong thing. You're fighting to remain a component.
This is the call to action. Don't fight to be a replaceable cog in the machine. Fight to own the machine. The political left in particular needs to hear this. They often find themselves fighting to keep jobs that exploit them, instead of fighting for the collective ownership that would liberate them.
That's the irony Simon points out, isn't it? The left hates the capitalist system, but ends up fighting to stay employed within it. Hook number 3. The economy grows by monetizing the collapse of human connection.
We touched on this, the friendship recession. It's the dark, ugly secret of GDP. We have to realize that economic growth, as we measure it, is not synonymous with human well-being. In many cases, they are now opposites.
So we've covered the narrative, the logic, and the payoff. But I want to spend the rest of our time really digging into the transition, because this is where it gets scary. Simon makes a very specific point about the speed of this change. He talks about a rapid transition versus a slow transition. And, counterintuitively, he argues that we should want it to happen fast.
This is the rip the Band-Aid off theory of social change.
Normally, we want change to be slow and gradual so we can adapt. Why is slow bad in this case?
Because a slow transition divides and conquers the working and middle classes. Imagine the disruption happens over 20 years. First, the truck drivers and call center workers lose their jobs. What do the accountants and graphic designers say?
Tough luck. You should have learned to code.
Exactly. They blame the victim. They tell themselves, I'm safe because I'm a knowledge worker. I'm smart. Then, 5 years later, the accountants and designers lose their jobs to AI. What do the doctors and lawyers say?
We should have gone to med school.
It allows the elite to pick us off one by one. It creates a circular firing squad among the non-elite, where we fight each other for the dwindling number of remaining scraps.
But a fast transition.
A fast transition, which is what Simon predicts is actually going to happen, is different. If the truckers, the accountants, the coders, and the lawyers all get their jobs automated away within, say, a 24-month window,
Then we are all in the same boat at the same time.
suddenly it's not your personal failure for not reskilling, it's a systemic event, a historical crisis. If 40% of the population becomes unemployed overnight, the government has to act. You can't ignore 100 million angry unemployed voters. You can ignore 1 million.
That is a terrifying game of chicken to play with society. Basically, let's hope the economy crashes fast enough to save us.
The alternative is the boiling frog. We just slowly lose our dignity and our standard of living bit by bit while the billionaires retreat to their mega yachts and fortified bunkers. Simon argues for the shock. He believes the shock is the only thing powerful enough to break the normalcy bias.
Let's talk about that timeline again, because the source mentions specific tools that are accelerating this.
Yeah.
Things like Claude Cowork and Claude Code 4.5. These aren't theoretical anymore.
And they represent the crossing of a utility threshold. This is another key concept. Technology does nothing, and then it does everything all at once.
The cliff model of AI progress, not a slope.
Exactly. Think about self-driving cars. For years, they were 99% safe, which is useless. You can't take a nap in a 99% safe car. It's still a stress machine because you have to watch it like a hawk for that 1% failure. But the moment it hits 99.99999% safe, the utility threshold, it suddenly becomes viable to replace every taxi and truck driver on Earth. It goes from useless to completely indispensable overnight.
And Simon's saying we crossed that threshold for most white-collar work, including software development, in late 2025.
Yes. That's when tools like Claude Code 4.5 stopped being just fancy autocomplete and started being a full-on engineer. It can manage its own development environment. It can test and debug its own code. It crossed the line from being a tool to being an agent.
And that's where the agency paradox really kicks in, because if the agent can do the work, the human is just overhead.
Exactly. And in business, overhead always gets cut.
I want to loop back to the anti-AI movement for a second. Simon has a bit of a bone to pick with the political left here. We touched on it, but let's go deeper. Why does he think the left is getting this so wrong?
It's what he calls a tragedy of imagination. The modern left has spent so much time and energy critiquing capitalism and the billionaire class that they have defined themselves against the rich rather than for a new, better system.
So they're stuck in reactive mode.
Completely. So when AI comes along, this incredibly powerful tool of production, and says, hey, I can liberate every human from the drudgery of wage labor, the left panics, they instinctively see it as just another plot by the billionaires to starve them.
Which, to be fair, is a pretty valid fear given the last 200 years of history.
It is a totally valid fear, but the solution isn't to ban the AI. That's the Luddite approach. That's smashing the loom because you're afraid of it. The solution is to seize the loom.
Seize the means of computation.
Yes, if the workers own the robots, we get Star Trek. If the capitalists own the robots, we get Elysium. The robots themselves are neutral. They are just a massive source of leverage. Simon's argument is that the left should be leading the charge for sovereign equity, not fighting to preserve the 40-hour work week.
It's so weird that the conservative position in this new world is everyone gets paid for doing nothing, and the progressive position is we must preserve the dignity of work. The political poles have completely flipped.
It just shows how disoriented we all are. The political compass is just spinning wildly.
This reminds me of that stat about infrastructure investment. He says 1.9% of global GDP is now going into AI compute and infrastructure. That's 5 times the investment relative to GDP of the Manhattan Project.
Think about that. The Manhattan Project built the atomic bomb. It changed the geopolitical landscape of the planet forever. It ended a world war and started a Cold War. And we are doing 5 of those simultaneously right now to build synthetic intelligence. And most of the world is just debating who won the football game last night.
It's the normalcy bias again. We are building the replacement for the human mind at an industrial scale, and we're treating it like another gadget launch.
It is the single biggest construction project in human history, and we are building our own economic obsolescence.
So if you are listening to this right now, and you are feeling that existential vertigo, that spinning sensation, what is the advice? Simon talks about awareness being the first step.
The first step is to break your own denial. Admit the timeline is short. Admit that your job, no matter how creative or complex you think it is not safe. Once you truly accept that, you can stop fighting for job security, which is a ghost, and start fighting for economic security.
And those are 2 very different things.
Completely different. Job security relies on an employer needing you. It relies on you being useful to capital. Economic security relies on you having a fundamental right to the resources of your society. We need to shift the entire conversation to UBI, to sovereign equity, to the civil dividend.
And we need to prepare psychologically. We need to learn how to be unproductive and not feel guilty about it.
That might honestly be the hardest part for our generation. We have to deprogram decades of conditioning. We have to learn that sitting on a porch watching the rain is not wasting time. It is living. We have to relearn how to be human beings instead of just human doings.
Just where the soul comes back into the picture.
And we need to find new sources of prestige. Right now, prestige is I'm a VP at Google. In the future, prestige might be I run the local community garden, or I organize the neighborhood philosophy club.
Or just, I am a really good friend.
Imagine that. A society where being a good, reliable friend gives you more social status than being a CEO.
That sounds nice. But getting there is going to be incredibly bumpy.
Extremely bumpy. The structural crisis, Simon predicts, involves a total collapse of the tax base. Governments run on income tax and payroll tax.
Right. If no one has income, the government goes broke at the exact moment we need it most.
Unless they tax the robots. That is the only way out. You have to shift the tax burden from human labor to automated capital. Or, as in Model B, the government simply owns the automation itself.
It really feels like we are heading toward a binary outcome. It's either incredibly good or incredibly bad. There is no middle-of-the-road future here.
No. The middle of the road, this idea that we'll just keep working our 9-to-5 jobs alongside super intelligent AI, is unstable. It collapses mathematically. We either crash down into dystopia or we break through to abundance.
Simon mentions a terrifying stat that less than 1% of the human population has been genuinely introduced to this vision.
That is the scary part. The most important decisions about the future of humanity are being made in a few boardrooms in San Francisco and by policymakers who barely understand how their Wi-Fi works. The public is not part of this conversation at all.
Well, that is why we're doing this deep dive, to get the vocabulary out there. Sovereign equity, the jobless boom, civic leverage. These are the terms you need to understand to survive the next dinner table conversation and the next election.
These are the intellectual weapons you need for the next 5 years.
I want to revisit the aristocrat idea one last time. Let's say it all works out. It's 2035. The transition happened. We survived. We have sovereign equity. What does a Tuesday look like? I want you to paint a picture for the listeners.
Okay. It's 2035. You wake up when your body wants to, not when an alarm clock screams at you. There's no cortisol spike of panic. You check your account and your universal equal income payment is there. It covers your housing, food, healthcare, and basic needs. You aren't rich in the 2020 sense of owning a yacht, but you are completely fundamentally secure.
So no panic about rent.
Yeah.
No Sunday scaries before the work week.
Zero panic. You have a long breakfast with your family or friends. There's no rushing off to a commute. Then you pursue your interest. Maybe you've been learning to build a wooden boat in a community workshop. You spend 4 hours sanding the hull, not because you have to sell it, but because you love the smell of the wood and the feel of it in your hands.
Maybe you're collaborating with an AI to code a video game, just for fun.
Or maybe you're training for a triathlon. Or reading the classics you never had time for. And in the afternoon, you meet up with friends, real friends. You spend hours just talking, eating, connecting. You might volunteer at the local school, not to teach the curriculum, the AI does that perfectly, but to mentor kids, to be a stable human presence in their lives.
You provide the emotional intelligence and the wisdom that the machines can simulate but can't truly feel.
Exactly. You live a life of high engagement, high connection, and low stress. It's the life that billionaires try to buy for themselves today. In 2035, it could be the default human condition.
That is the optimistic future.
It is the future Simon chooses to believe in, and it is the one he argues we should all be fighting for.
But the alternative?
The alternative is we sit in our tiny apartments unemployed, watching the rich live that life on screens, while police drones patrol the streets to keep us from rioting over food prices.
So the choice is ours.
The choice is ours, but the window to make it is closing fast.
He says we don't have decades to build consensus. We have years, maybe less.
That is the timeline. That is the urgency.
Okay, we are approaching the end of the hour. This has been a heavy one, but hopefully an illuminating one. We've unpacked the jobless boom, the iron cage, the agency paradox, and the aristocrat model.
We've covered the map of the new world. Now you have to decide where you're going to walk.
I want to end with the outro challenge from the source. Simon asks us not just to think, but to be active.
Share these ideas. Don't let the people you care about sleepwalk into this. If your friend is worried about their job, don't just say, it'll be fine. Show them the data. Show them the vision of sovereign equity. Start the conversation about ownership, not employment.
Because if we don't demand a seat at the table, we are going to be on the menu.
That is the brutal truth of it.
I'm going to leave you with the final provocation from the text. It's a question that I want you to really sit with tonight, maybe while you are staring at the ceiling trying to process all of this.
What will you do when you no longer have to earn the right to exist?
Think about that. Really think about it. Because you might have to answer it a lot sooner than you think.
And remember, labor has no future. And that
Is a good thing.
if we make it one.
This has been Doctorates of the Absurd. I'm your host.
And I'm the expert.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the other side of the transition.
Stay curious and stay human.
Good night, everyone.